Good afternoon and welcome to this really important event at the Cryosphere Pavilion. We'd like especially to welcome those of you who are watching at the Cryosphere Pavilion hubs in Stockholm and in Geneva. If you have questions, please put them into the chat and we'll come to them in due order. There has been a bit of a change in terms of the order of speakers. So we will hold questions until the entire event has moved through both the in-person virtual and some of the video events at the end. One of the challenges of moving away from fossil fuels, which is definitely a large focus of the cryosphere dynamics that you see over here in the pavilion in terms of the need to stay below 1.5 degrees, is that the transition off of fossil fuels needs to be something that occurs in a just and fair manner. And that includes, of course, the workers who've worked in these industries and the communities on which they rely. And that's why this is such an important event. So I would like to go first to Richard Lochhead, who is the Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work, virtually to talk about the importance of a just transition and Scotland's plans for doing so. So, Mr. Minister, we're very honored to have you. Please go ahead. You're muted. If you could begin again.
I think we're all set now, are we? Good. I just say thank you very much for the introduction, Pam, and I just want to start by thanking the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative for inviting me to this event, and I'm very pleased that the Scottish Government was able to co-sponsor the Cryosphere Pavilion, which of course I had the opportunity to visit in person last week, and I picked up my copy of the State of Cryosphere 2021, which I've been looking at, and of course which features Aviemore Ski Resort in Scotland, as well as one of your case studies. And I welcome everyone to Scotland and to Glasgow. And I know that today's a big day and tomorrow's a probably even bigger day in terms of COP26, and we're all hoping for the proper outcome we want to see. I am Scotland's first Just Transition Minister. I also have responsibility for employment and fair work, and that's not a coincidence, they're closely aligned, and I'll no doubt refer to that later on. But in terms of Scotland, Scotland is not an Arctic country, technically speaking, but being a close neighbour, we share many outlooks and characteristics, and sometimes weather patterns too. The rurality and remoteness of our countries and regions present common challenges, from ways to accelerate the decarbonisation of rural communities to sustainable tourism. And there's a lot that we can jointly work on in the times ahead. In fact, 98% of Scotland's landmass is classified as rural, but a mere 17% of our population live in rural areas. Another feature we have in common is our historical dependency on fossil fuels, which you refer to as well, be it coal, oil or gas. And with the eyes of the world on Glasgow, we are keen to demonstrate how we are leading the transition away from fossil fuels whilst taking account of the needs of those whose livelihoods depend upon them. We have to learn the lessons of the past. Scotland bore the scars of poorly managed economic and social change from decades ago, not least in our coal mining communities, which were shut down over a small period of time and back in the 1980s mainly. And here we are in 2021, and we can still see the economic and social intergenerational scars in some of the communities most affected. So to stop history repeating itself, we have decided to take a very broad view of just transition, and it goes beyond individual sectors and regions. It's about delivering on Scotland's social, economic and climate goals. It's about ensuring that the workers, the businesses and communities at risk of being left behind are given a really strong voice. So simply put, it's about harnessing the transition to build a better and more equal society, using the transition over the coming decades as a window of opportunity to tackle embedded inequalities in our society, as well as to create good green jobs as we go towards our net zero targets here in Scotland in 2045. So we recognise the huge value too in continuing to work with international partners, sharing our experiences and continuing to develop best practice. That's why I'm very pleased to be part of this kind of event at COP26 with yourselves today. As one of the nations that spearheaded the Industrial Revolution in the world, it is also only right that Scotland should be at the forefront of a fair and green transformation. So we have committed to a 75% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, a world-leading ambition, and to be net zero by 2045. We have already roughly halved emissions since 1990, in large part due to a wholesale shift in how we generate our electricity. Around 97% of our electricity domestic consumption at the moment is from renewables. So that's been a big, huge step forward in the last 10 or 20 years. In this next decisive decade, we will need to largely eliminate emissions in sectors of our economy which have arguably a greater impact on people's everyday lives, including transport, heat and buildings, and industry. And given the centrality of these sectors to our economy here in Scotland and how many of our people make their living from them, undertaking the transition in a fair and just way will be vital if we are to retain their buy-in, as well as take advantage of the significant opportunities that a cleaner, greener economy offers our people and society. So we have taken steps to put in place some of the measures we think we need to deliver a just transition. We took early action by embedding just transition principles into our climate change legislation. So that means we have not only written into law a commitment to reach net zero by 2045, but to do it in a way which is fair. That undoubtedly sends a really important signal, and we recognise the need to foster dialogue across affected parties and invite expert opinion on how to effectively undertake a just transition that leaves no one behind. So that's part of the reason why we're one of the first countries in the world to establish a national Just Transition Commission to advise us on the way forward. We are now in the process of establishing a new Just Transition Commission with a refreshed remit, purpose and membership that will enable us to have a strong delivery focus. Now we need to know we need to do, so we just need to deliver it now, because the original commission gave us all the recommendations which we accepted. So it's now really, delivering. And in the words of the reappointed chair of the commission, Professor Jim Skia, we have talked the talk in Just Transition, and now we need to walk the walk. Now, of course, you mentioned in your opening remarks about the dependency on fossil fuels and the big challenge we have in transitioning away from fossil fuels. And that does take me on to Scotland's oil and gas sector. And we're one of, if not Europe's biggest oil and gas producer. And our oil and gas sector in Scotland has long since been a source of prosperity in our country and provided livelihoods for thousands and thousands of people. But we do recognise that countries around the world cannot continue to maximise economic recovery of fossil fuels if the aims of the Paris Agreement are to be met. Our focus, therefore, is on achieving the fastest possible just transition for the oil and gas sector, one that delivers jobs and economic benefit, ensures our energy security, and meets our climate obligations. It's really vital that we accelerate the development of alternative sources of energy and also to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and seize the economic opportunities that energy transition offers Scotland. Even as we transition away from fossil fuels, we know that they will still have a vital role to play in Scotland's energy future. After all, the North Sea will continue to provide Scotland with an important level of domestic energy security until we make that transition. But crucially, the infrastructure, skills and expertise of the sector can be a huge asset in helping us to achieve net zero, helping Scotland become a world leader in emerging areas such as hydrogen technology, carbon capture and storage, and offshore wind. And so we're seeking to support Scotland's oil and gas sector to seize these opportunities that these technologies present. To get us started in that journey, we have set out a national just transition planning framework, which explains how we will plan for a just transition across the economy. We have committed to making the energy strategy our first just transition plan, which will be published in the coming year. And we have based our approach on the principle of co-design. We must ensure those people most affected by the transition have a voice in determining their own future. And to support that, we've made a number of other commitments. We have announced a 10-year, £500 million Just Transition Fund for the northeast of Scotland, Moray, where the oil and gas industry in Scotland is largely based, and committed to developing a skills guarantee for workers in carbon-intensive sectors to help them move smoothly into decarbonised sectors. We also know that as many as 10% of occupations may be faced with the need to retrain or upskill as a result of the transition to net zero. So that clearly is a key area we have to get right. In Scotland, we know that a great many people already working in oil and gas have the skills and knowledge needed for the transition. Research published earlier this year showed that as many as 90% have medium to high skills transferability to low carbon options. And in December 2020, we published a Climate Emergency Skills Action Plan to help create a future green workforce. We've also set up a Green Jobs Workforce Academy, and these are all together important commitments we've made that demonstrate how we are putting our words into action, hopefully, and how we will deliver a just transition in a coordinated and managed way. So importantly, it will create new opportunities for young people who might be thinking about a career in the energy sector. So I hope I've set the context for the just transition in Scotland. It's about ensuring we have good green jobs as alternative employment opportunities available for people moving out of fossil fuels through the transition, but also using the economic transformation as we move towards a net zero society as a window of opportunity to tackle inequalities and have better jobs, not just green jobs, but good green jobs, and just fix some of the problems we've got at the moment and hopefully improve Scottish society and the Scottish economy and the quality of life for the people that live here. So thanks again for inviting me to join the panel. I look forward to the discussion and the questions in a few moments' time. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. We now have a couple of videos. One is actually a presentation of Lauren McCallum, who was supposed to speak here, but is sidelined at the moment by illness. And she will speak about her experience as a child actually of two oil workers, but who also has a great deal of care about the cryosphere, and so really balances this tension between the need to act on climate change and yet at the same time to protect the workers, including her own family, that work in industries that will need to transition very rapidly, much more rapidly than we've seen in the past, simply in order to meet the challenge. So if that video is up, she spoke here at the pavilion a few days ago, and so we're going to show that first.
Thank you so much, Pam. It's delighted to be here, and welcome to Scotland as well. It's not every day that you have the world's climate community come to your doorstep, so it's an honour to be here with you all. But also, I guess, to give a bit of a human perspective around the stories that we heard from Grant and also Pam. My name is Lauren McCallum, and I'm the General Manager of Protect Our Winters UK. And we're a climate action charity that works with the outdoor industry and community. And we help passionate outdoor people become effective climate advocates so we can achieve systemic solutions to climate change. And that's really important because we understand that as much as personal lifestyle choices are help us get on the journey and they'll deliver some change, we need to use that connection to the snow, use that connection to the outdoors, and really push for the systemic changes that are going to give us the big carbon reductions that we need to see to keep us to 1.5 degrees. And we've done this at the minute through, we've got various campaigns running, but one of our biggest campaigns that we've got running is Divest the Dirt, around trying to engage the outdoor community to put pressure on their pension providers, but also around North Sea oil and gas, and trying to get a commitment to an end date around that extraction and what that means for Scotland and the just transition. But I guess really I'm here as I live in Aviemore. I'm one of the 18,000 residents that Grant talked about, and I wanted to kind of give a bit of a perspective on the ground. Cairngorm is 1,245 meters tall, which I guess to some of our European or North American mountains is fairly small. But as we've heard this week that, and we've seen in Grant's presentation, that resorts below 2,000 meters are going to struggle to see that consistent snowfall. So what does that mean for us? And we've seen the impacts again through Grant's presentation around the sort of biodiversity. But what does that mean for the people? What does that mean for my local community? You know, it's easy to sort of talk about the loss of snow, but I feel that with the loss of that also means the loss of my community. Scotland has a rich history of snow sports, and some of the most pioneering minds that came to Scotland after World War II came to learn how to set up the ski industries, and then went to Europe. So we have a sort of deep cultural history of skiing and snowboarding and the snow sports industry. And I feel like that intergenerational knowledge is really at threat, because if we can't connect to the cryosphere, if we can't connect to snow, if we can't have those deep, meaningful life experiences within nature, the powder days, or the days that are bleak, and I don't know, you get lost or something happens, but you get through it and you go to the pub afterwards and you have a couple of beers and it's all right. Those experiences in life are so important to connect us to the issues. So if we lose snow and we lose that connection, then how can we ever know why it's important or why we need to protect it? So I guess that's our mission and vision at Protect Our Winters UK, is to use that so that we can lobby for more progressive change. In Scotland, just a bit of a snapshot, there's over 600 jobs that the ski industry employs directly, and it contributes over to 30 million. That's not the wider recreational industry, that's just skiing. And I'm a daughter of North Sea oil and gas workers. I grew up in the Northeast, and both my parents work for some pretty well-known oil and gas companies. And so when we talk about the just transition, we think about, the sort of more traditional saving North Sea oil and gas jobs, for example. But I guess what I would like to talk about more is, where is the just transition for the rural economy when we lose snow, when we lose that community? Because it's going to have the same impacts just as a more traditional industry that gets up and leaves after it shuts its doors. So I guess I'm trying to bump that up the agenda to sort of everyone to keep that in mind, and I guess some solidarity. I guess I just wanted to close by saying I'm a great believer that the Cairngorms has shaped who I am today. It's a very unique landscape. It's more of an Arctic landscape than it is an alpine. And I guess there's I've just totally forgotten her name. Anyways, the phrase is, we go out to go in. And Nan Shepherd, very famous naturalist who wrote a book called The Living Mountain, and she says in that, you have to go out to go in. And if we can't go out, then how can we go in? And I feel the answers within us, lie within that retrospective of going outside and coming back inside to evaluate and to make those changes. So I guess wanted to finish with that because if we lose that opportunity to go out and we can't have the evaluation to go in, then we will never be able to make the progressive changes that we want to see. So I'll be here for some questions, and thank you very much.
So this is thanks to Lauren, and she obviously will not be here to answer questions, but this we thought would really fit into this topic at this side event, because she obviously raises the just transition for her parents to a certain extent, but also that climate change impacts embody a level of just transition that also is going to be necessary. There are certain activities, like those working in the ski industry, that probably will no longer be able to survive even at 1.5 degrees. But of course, the stressors are going to be even worse at higher temperatures. We have a brief film clip also teed up now, which is from a movie that Lauren has participated in that is about young activists. It's actually a global movie, but this focuses on her and her activities in Scotland. So we'll tee that up and then do a Q&A afterwards. You ready?
For the last few years, I've been part of a global movement taking a stand against the fossil fuel industry. This is me getting arrested, protesting outside the International Petroleum Conference in London. There's no question, we are hopelessly addicted to fossil fuels. Whether it's the 32 billion barrels of oil or 7.5 billion tons of coal consumed globally every year, the science is clear. We need to leave what's left of it in the ground and switch to clean energy sources. But when 60 million people around the world depend on the gas and oil industry to earn a living, and many more of us rely on the energy they produce, how do we create a just transition that works for everyone? I'm heading to Inverness and Cromarty Firth in the northeast of Scotland, an area that's home to more than a third of the UK's 120,000 oil and gas workers. There's a climate activist called Lauren McCallum who has a unique perspective on the industry and what the switch to green energy could mean for a place like this.
I love the mountains. I love going into the mountains, whether that's on my snowboard, whether that's by foot, on my bike. For me, activism is using your life to give life. That is the basis of activism. So my name is Lauren McCallum, and I'm the General Manager of Protect Our Winters UK, which is an outdoor-focused climate action charity. I live in Aviemore, which is a small village in the Central Highlands. It's just an incredible place to be, and I'm really privileged to call it my home. Just getting into swimming, into naked swimming. Aviemore, full frontal floaters is what we call ourselves.
We've come to the Cromarty Firth port, a servicing depot and graveyard for oil rigs.
I've never seen an oil rig up close before. The image is so iconic.
Quite a stark visual representation of what's happening out in the North Sea.
Well, we're so disconnected from where our energy comes from.
Oh, totally, 100%. It's so easy to just kind of take a picture of this and be like, right, boo, bad.
Yeah.
Shut it down. And yes, it does need to shut down, but we need this managed decline, and we need to take people with us so that we can build a more just world where it works for everyone.
The port at the Cromarty Firth has been at the centre of the UK oil industry since it began in the 1970s.
It'd be really foolish of us to not recognise the sense of pride that oil and gas brought to the North East. The sense of provide for the nation, to provide for our communities.
So often when I think about oil and gas, it's very easy just to bundle it up into one big negative picture, this sort of awful corporation that's damaging our planet. But of course those companies are made up of people who are just doing their job.
Definitely. What picture, the rigs, and then literally the community right there. So how do we make sure that when we move away from these and go into renewables, how do we make sure that working class communities aren't left behind? Because what happens, right? Okay, we decommission them, we take them out to sea, right? Thanks very much, see you later.
And then, yeah.
A transition from a fossil fuel-based economy to a green economy to a net zero economy, we have to make sure that workers' rights are protected within that transition and not repeat what we've seen in coal, where industries just pulled out and it left everyone to fend for themselves. High levels of social deprivation, poor healthcare, poor provisions, poverty, that absolutely cannot happen here.
Lauren's taken me to meet someone on the other side of this story called Willie. He has been in the oil and gas industry for 25 years and also happens to be Lauren's dad.
Both my parents work at North Sea Oil and Gas. I benefited from North Sea Oil and Gas most of my life. It has given my parents good, decent paying jobs and provided a very comfortable life for myself and my siblings. Growing up, oil and gas was seen as a very, very good thing.
But how does Willie see the drive away from fossil fuels into clean energy?
I just want to make sure that that commitment also involves my fellow colleagues and a future for them. And to me, they've learned the skills in oil and gas. The transferable skills is there to go into renewable energy. To see that go to waste, if we just say, well, that's it, oil and gas is finished, we don't need you anymore, that would just be such a waste. And it's important that we keep that going.
So, Willie, we have these huge yellow towers behind us, which I think are the base of wind turbines. I guess that could be the future of the industry here.
Yes, absolutely. So you've got two comparisons here. You've got the current and the old oil and gas, and now you've got the new coming into the wind turbine technology. So
that's kind of exciting.
That's
It's the
future,
same resources, the same spaces, just being transformed.
Meeting Lauren and Willie has been a real eye-opener. In this story, it's not just a case of clean energy on one side versus fossil fuels on the other.
I'll be the first to hold my hand up and say that in the past I've been guilty of massively oversimplifying the gas and oil industry as just this one evil force that needs to be closed down, essentially. And being here today, seeing these rigs up close and meeting Willie has reminded me that it's like any other industry. It's made up of people, of workers, of communities who rely on this industry. Those people need to be part of this transition. And so I'm curious to understand what a community can look like that is not only embracing renewables, but is thriving on a renewable future.
Thank you so much. So we now have time, if we can bring back the minister, for any Q&A, or I thought actually, Mr. Minister, I give you a chance to comment first on what you've just seen. We certainly got to see some beautiful pictures of Scotland.
You certainly did, yes. It made my heart go a bit quicker because it was looking stunning. We were very proud of our country. Well, I mean, I think the film and the comments summed up very nicely the challenges we face and the rationale behind a just transition, because we have people in Scotland, in every country around the world, who will be working in fossil fuels at the moment, and they will be wondering what all this means for their livelihoods, for their families' future, and so on. And we have to make sure that these people have a voice. And we just heard a perfect example of that there. So that's really what the just transition is all about. And of course, it's not just about oil and gas and fossil fuels. The impact of climate change on ski resorts and other industries is clear to see as well. So just it sums up the scale of the challenge, but it also justifies the need for a just transition.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah, please. If you could go to the microphone.
Take the headphones off, that's okay. Thank you for some interesting talks and videos. My name's Tavis Potts. I'm the Director of the Centre for Energy Transition at the University of Aberdeen, and also I've just set up the Just Transitions Lab at the university as well. I've a foot in both worlds. My scientific background, my PhD is in Antarctic and polar research from Australia, where I'm from originally. And I've worked a lot in Svalbard as well, teaching students about climate law. And I have a couple of questions. I have lots, but I'll just boil it down to two. My first question is, we've heard a lot of the debate in the UK, and I'm sure that the minister is very familiar with the Cambo question. And in the UK, under the Oil and Gas Authority, we've recently set in place a net zero commitment, which is equal to the maximising economic yield commitment, economic benefits from our UK continental shelf. And yet there is a lot of vagueness about how this climate trigger is going to work in practice when we potentially license or explore that. So I know Richard has had some commentary on that. I'd like to hear a bit more about his view on how such a, I know it's out of our jurisdiction, at least at the moment, that may change in the future, but how would such a trigger work in practice? How do we apply a climate trigger to oil and gas licensing in the future? My other question is about the question of jobs, and a just transition is it's very important to focus on jobs, but it's also equally important to focus about vibrant, sustainable communities across the board as well. And in Scotland, we have record levels of investment in offshore wind, for example, but the jobs are not there yet. They're growing, but they're not at pace yet to have a segue between, say, oil and gas and wind. And a big part of that is because we don't manufacture or build a lot of the components of the offshore wind industry. We assemble and we monitor, we manage wind farms, but we don't build things here. In fact, we've seen factories close around Scotland that produce wind turbines and blades. So how can we ensure that the entire supply chain for offshore wind and other parts of the net zero economy are based here, so we can really harvest and maximize those jobs? So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Two big questions. I'll try and keep them, the answers relatively succinct. Firstly, in terms of the Campbell oil fields, the Scottish Government's view, and the First Minister has been in correspondence with the Prime Minister at UK Government level about this, because the UK Government is responsible for oil and gas licensing, is that any new field, whether or not it's got a license or not, if it's not actually started producing and we've not started extracting the fossil fuels from the field, should be subject to a compatibility test with our net zero targets. And clearly, if it would jeopardise achieving our targets in 2045, then it shouldn't go ahead. But we need to see the evidence. There's clearly a disagreement between the Scottish Government and the UK Government, because UK Government are saying that they've not acceded to our request yet to let that test take place for the Campbell field, which has a licence, but not actually started extracting yet. And they've already accepted the principle for new licences in the future, but we said that should be extended to current licences that extraction is not started. But of course, the UK Government have not accepted that request yet. And we've also said to them we want to have a dialogue with them and work closely with them on that test, so we understand, as we just heard there's a need to understand how the test would be carried out, the compatibility test. And we have said, of course, there's no case for unlimited extraction of oil and gas. It can't be unlimited. But in the meantime, we've got to ensure that anything that's going ahead that's got a license at the moment, or even where it's got a license but not started, or it's not got a license yet, has got to have to go through that test of compatibility with net zero targets. In terms of the job situation, green jobs, we're absolutely determined to create green jobs as we go forward. Firstly, because we deserve the jobs to be created in Scotland in our own communities. And secondly, because we've got a big opportunity as we go through the transition to get economic benefit, which is new jobs that are there as an option for people who are transitioning from carbonised industries to decarbonised industries. In terms of offshore winds, you're quite right. We are disappointed there's not been more benefit from onshore jobs from the offshore wind or indeed onshore wind in the past. Scotland's manufacturing sector, unfortunately, was decimated several decades ago, and there's been some attempts to correct that in terms of wind turbines for various reasons. The factories that were built didn't prove to be successful. The next generation of offshore wind is going to be huge in Scottish waters. It's very, very significant, and both the Scottish Government and the UK Government have put in place measures that should increase significantly the benefit for the supply chains onshore. And we're asking those companies that are bidding for licenses for offshore wind to give statements, etc., of what they're going to do to deliver onshore jobs in the supply chains. So it's a lot stronger this time, and we have to learn from mistakes of the past. So I'm confident that we'll get a lot more onshore jobs, including hopefully manufacturing jobs, and significant numbers going forward.
Thank you so much. Other questions? Yeah. There's one question online. And Heidi is coming up to read it.
From the Project Winters team. The question is, what is the Scottish Government's plans for creating an effective dialogue process to engage workers who will be the most affected in the rural economy? Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi, for reading out the question. So I've been in this post as Scotland's first Just Transition Minister for just a few months, because we only created it at the Scottish elections back in May. And I'm giving a lot of thought to that. I thought the video and Lauren's comments in the video was very powerful. We're already committed, on the advice of the Just Transition Commission we set up, which looked into this issue, to ensure that we have plans, not just for individual economic sectors, but for regions of Scotland as well. And we want those plans to involve all the people who are directly impacted by the transition. So we will, as soon as we can, start putting together just transition plans. The first one's for the energy sector, because it's the most carbon intensive sector in Scotland. Other plans will be formulated with local authorities, local representatives, community representatives, working closely together on those plans. So, what I'm saying to you is that the rural communities will have a plan, and they will be involved directly in putting that plan together to make sure we've got a just transition and that there's alternative job opportunities, etc., and the skills area, upskilling people, retraining people, and all these issues that are very relevant to the particular area that's been addressed by that plan.
Looks like we have another online question. Okay.
Thank you very much. So we have a question from Daria, who is watching on YouTube. Daria is asking, when can we expect the details about the climate compatibility checkpoint for licenses? And second question, can Scotland achieve its climate goals without energy regulation being devolved? Thank you.
Well, both these questions are very good questions, and they relate to the division of powers between the Scottish Government and the UK Government, because the Scottish Parliament is a devolved Parliament. We have many powers, but there's still many powers reserved to the UK Parliament in London, and that includes oil and gas. So the compatibility question about the compatibility test for new oil fields or gas fields is very much for the UK Government, because that's their responsibility, and we're asking similar questions of the UK Government, and we're not getting the answers yet. So I agree with your question, and I agree it has to be answered. So we want to know more about that compatibility test, but also, as I said before in answer to the previous question, we want that compatibility test applied to all fields that have not started having fossil fuels extracted from them yet, whether or not they have a licence. In terms of your second question, I think, yes, the Scottish Government, the Scottish Parliament does need more energy regulation. I think that would help us greatly and move at a faster pace with the transition. We recently, as one example, did not secure the green light for Scotland's proposal for a carbon capture and storage project, which also included some hydrogen projects within it. It's called the ACORN project. And that was viewed by the Scottish business community and the Scottish Government as the outstanding candidate to get the go-ahead from the exercise that the UK Government was carrying out. And unfortunately, the UK Government chose two projects in England, and there was a lot of unhappiness and anger in Scotland that the ACORN project didn't get the go-ahead. If we'd had energy regulation, we'd have been able to give the go-ahead to that. And unfortunately, we're now not getting to go as fast as we'd like with the transition because of that project not getting green light.
Other questions? Yes, please.
Hello there. My name is Guillaume Herman. I work in Marine Scotland Science in Aberdeen, so quite close to the oil and gas. I was wondering if I was reading a report a couple of years ago called Prosperity Without Growth, which described, it was actually commissioned by the Sustainable Committee for Development from the UK government, which after that got dissolved. I don't know why. and it was really insightful and describe how prosperity can be attained without the goose chase of economical growth that we all seem to fight for. And I wonder, what do you think of? Is Scotland in a way challenging that chase and trying to maybe go deeper into the root of the whole climate we've got, which is a lot of consumption and infinite growth?
Thanks. That's a really good topic, and the answer is yes. And also, I know we're talking about the climate emergency just now, but there's also lessons to learn from the COVID crisis and the pandemic, the global pandemic. And we, like many people, like all human beings, have been reflecting on the impact on our lives of the global pandemic. And I think many people have reassessed what it means, and it's highlighted inequalities in our societies. The pandemic, it's highlighted a whole range of issues in terms of what makes people happy, the work-life balance, all these issues. And that coincides with the kind of research you were speaking about, which is also very relevant to climate change, which is that economic growth and wealth is not always about money, and we want a well-being economy in Scotland. So we're doing a lot of work just now in Scotland to look at the well-being economy, and we're even talking about having legislation. We've started up an alliance with other governments on the wellbeing economy, and Scotland's one of the founding members of that new alliance. So there's a lot of dialogue going on between a number of governments that Scotland's speaking to about a wellbeing economy. So yes, I do agree with you, and I just reassure you that's something that the current Scottish government is very keen to pursue, is about creating a wellbeing economy where our happiness, self-fulfillment, quality of life, and the measurement of success is not just about money, it's about lots of other things, and that's about overall well-being. And that, I think that's a very healthy debate to have. And climate change, of course, is very relevant to that, because if we only determine success by economic growth, then that's not good for the planet.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I think we'll close. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Scotland was welcomed into the 50 by 30 coalition last week because its climate plan and laws are fully consistent with the 1.5 goal in terms of at least 50% reductions by 2030. As a matter of fact, the analysis of Scotland that was done by Climate Analytics is the best climate plan that has been analyzed so far. And it occurs to me that in this just transition and having a minister for just transition, Scotland is to some degree perhaps a model for other countries as well. This isn't to say that there can't be improvements, but we feel like there are a lot of countries out there that are in no way 50 by 30 consistent. And it's important to have a few. And at this point, we now have 6 that are sort of out there leading and showing what can be done and that it can be done. So a bit of a message of hope at the end of this event. And if you're interested in that analysis, you can either look at it online or there will be a very long event actually focused on that tomorrow that will also discuss other countries at the same time at 10 a.m. here in the pavilion. So with that, Mr. Minister, I don't know if you have any final words that you would like to say, but thank you so much for taking the time to be with us this afternoon.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the questions. As ever, it stimulated me to think about a number of really important issues that we have to capture. And I just want to wish everyone all the best with their endeavours to play their role at COP26, whatever capacity that is in. And I hope that the international dialogue and partnership that we've encouraged here in Scotland and others have encouraged as well continues, so that we can work together. We're all in this together. We're all in this together, so we have to work together and do the right thing for the planet and humankind.
Thank you so much. Our next event will be focused actually on the State of the Cryosphere report that was released just before COP26 and the 50 by 30 message of why this is so important. So welcome back here at 6 p.m. local. Glasgow time. And otherwise, thank you very much for your attention and for your questions. Thank you.